Okay.
Okay. So this button class. So this is a AWT class to create buttons. So again, there are two constructor we have. So normal constructor, then a simple constructor with a text. So most of the time you should use the second constructor. Whatever label you want to show on the button, you provide it inside this constructor. Then we have a set label to change the label value dynamically. Then get label to get the value of the label. So handling buttons. So you buttons to create events. Whenever you click on a button, nothing will happen unless you attach the button with some event handler. So there is a interface action listener. So you will need to implement the action listener in order to generate events actually, so, to perform some action. So whenever you implement this interface, so you will need to provide the definition for the action perform function. So this is a mandatory function inside the interface. So we will discuss event driven later also, but today just you can see that the action listener is an interface, and inside the interface, whenever you implement this interface, you will need to override this function action perform. It will automatically get called whenever the user clicks on the button. So let's see the demo. Okay. So again, we are extending the applet and we are implementing the action listener because we want that whenever user clicks on the button, we want to perform some logic there. So we create a button. We have three buttons actually: yes, no, and maybe. Then we are calling the second constructor new button inside the init function, and we are passing the label. Then we are adding the three controls, three buttons on the applet, and this is the way we attach the event listener. So event listener, add action listener. So whenever you call this function add action listener, you are attaching the functionality, button click functionality with the button. So this is the function which will be called. So yes is a button, no is a button, maybe is a button. So yes dot add action listener. Then we are passing the this. This means the whatever object you are calling this function on. So the button will get passed actually to this add action listener function. So then action perform function actually. So action perform function will be called by the Java runtime whenever someone clicks on the button. So this action event object is passed by Java runtime. So you can call some of the functionality of the action event class and to determine which button was clicked and whatever the label was. There are some common function inside this action event. So we'll say this function. So this thing is clear, right? So this line.
Yes.
Okay. So let's see what is action event. So Java runtime will create an object of action event whenever the end user clicks on the button, and after that how we are using this object. So action event is the object AE, then we are calling get action command. So whenever you call this function, this is a function inside the action event class. So it will return the command whatever the label the button has actually. So first button we have and that it contains the label yes, the second button contains the label no, right? So you can put an if else here and determine whatever the button was clicked. And here what we are doing is we are message is a global variable actually inside the applet, and we are changing the message value depending on the button whatever it was clicked. So if yes was clicked, So we want to show you press yes. If no was clicked, so we want to show you press no. So at the end of this function, action performed, we are calling the repaint function. So repaint function will call the update function, and update function will call the paint function. So paint function will again redraw whatever the string was shown on the screen. So let's run this program. Okay, so we have 3 buttons. So let's click on the yes. You press yes. No, you press no. Undecided, undecided. Okay.
Okay.
So any question on this?
No. Good.
Okay. So actually you have already done the applet programming. So that's why
Yeah,
you
I've done some.
yes. Yes. But I am explaining all the details just because of Shahid. I know you have already done. So just for Shahid, I am
Yeah, no.
again discussing everything. So
It's good review for me.
okay. So okay. So another example. This example is useful actually if you have many buttons on screen. So to deal with many buttons, say 10 to 12 buttons, like a calculator. If you want to create some calculator on screen calculator, so what you will do, you will create an array of buttons as a global variable, and whenever you call the add function, it will return the newly added object. So the newly added object is the button, whatever you are adding. So whenever a new object is added to the screen, we are putting it inside the some array, a new array, and this array is available globally. So again, we added 3 buttons, then we added them inside the array, then we are calling the a for loop, and for each of the buttons we are adding the add action listener. So inside the add action perform function, uh, this is the same thing we are doing here, but just a different approach. So in this approach we are calling the get source function of the action event. So get source function can be called on any of the action event function. So whenever you call this get source function, so get source function will return the actual object which was pressed. Right. So in the earlier example we were checking the label of the button, so that was not a good approach actually. You were hard coding the label value at 2 places. So the first place say yes, no on those labels of the button. So at 2 places we are hard coding the label. So while creating the button and while the action event, so there were 2 places that was not a good approach. So this is the better approach to check which button was pressed. So instead of checking the label, we are checking the actual button object. So get source function will return an object. So we are comparing this object to the whatever object we have in the list, button list array, right?
Yes.
So if any of the button is pressed and if this if condition is true, we go inside the if condition, we call the get label function of the button. So we'll know whatever the label the button contains. So we have no hard coded labels here. So this logic is very useful if we are creating many buttons on screen like a calculator. Okay. So we have checkbox. So checkbox, to create checkboxes in AWT, we have checkbox class. So this first constructor is not useful. It does not contain any label for the checkbox. And the second constructor we will be using most of the time. So whatever label you want to show with the checkbox, the third constructor takes yes, no along with the label. So it is pressed or not, the checkbox is on or off. So true or false for this constructor. Then we have the fourth constructor where we are passing the checkbox group. So this fourth constructor is used for creating radio buttons. We will discuss later. So the fifth constructor takes the checkbox group plus the on off for the button checkbox. Then we have some functions, most common functions for the checkbox class. So get state will return true or false. If the checkbox is checked, it will return true, and otherwise it will return false. Then we have a set state to check or uncheck the checkbox dynamically. We can call this function and provide true or false. Then we have the get label and set label function to get and set the label of the checkbox dynamically. So let's see the example of the checkbox. Okay, so inside the button, while creating the button to generate events and to attach events with the button, we were using the action listener interface. So when we use the action listener interface, we provide the definition inside the action performed function. But for checkbox, we will use the item listener interface. Okay.
Okay.
So because we want to implement the state change event here, because a checkbox contains some state information, either on or off. So we will use the item state change. Okay. So but you can use you can even use the action listener. So if someone presses on the enter button on the checkbox, the action event will be called, because but most of the time we use the item listener for checkbox. So we are getting 4 checkboxes, and these are global variables inside the applet. Then this is the same program actually like button. So the constructor we are using is the constructor which takes 3 parameters. So checkbox group is null and state is true. So the first checkbox we are creating contains the label Windows XP, and it is associated to no group. So we are passing null, and we are setting the third parameter is true. So we want this checkbox to be checked whenever the screen is loaded. So the other 3 constructors, other 3 checkboxes, we are using normal constructor. Then we are attaching all these 4 checkboxes. Then we have add item listener. So whenever you use this listener, item listener, so you call the add item listener function, and you are again passing the same checkbox. Then we have the item state change function, which we are providing the definition. Then whenever this function is called by the Java runtime, the Java runtime will generate a new object of type item event class, and this object is passed by the Java runtime. So we can use this object to perform some logic. So like get source function we already discussed, return the object. So whatever checkbox was clicked, like if user clicks on Windows Vista, this checkbox, so we are just checking, we have logic for only this checkbox, Windows Vista checkbox. Then if you want to print the whatever the label is it contains, so you can call the get item function. Now at the end we are calling the repaint function. So repaint function will call the update function, update function will call the paint function. So here what we are doing is we are just printing the state Windows XP.getState, Windows Vista.get. Since these variables are globally available, so we are just calling